culo. No dan culo. Él tiró la lagrimógena. Provocan. Mire la cara que tiene, la cara de odio. Con esa cara le hace el amor a su señora. Con esa cara alimenta a su hijo. Pero se mató el niño. Pero se mató el niño. No tiene capacidad. Hace 5 años golpearon a su señora y a su hijo. Son unos cobardes. ¡Váyanse! ¡Váyanse!
Ahora sí, compadrito, una cueca piola. Con criterio, compadre, con criterio.
Y arriba todos los chiquillos que andan en la calle luchando, compadre.
Déjale.
De a poquito la vamos a sacar.
No luchena mucho, que hacen ahí todos parqueados. ¿Quién gana?
Para todos los que beben alcohol en la vía pública, compadre. ¡Sí los vamos! ¡Sí los vamos!
¡Vamos! ¡Vaya!
¡Maldito! ¡Maldito Paco Verdugo!
Ay, 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 qué decir que soy honrado. Ay, 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 qué decir que soy honrado. Le presta el loco al gobierno. Ay, 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 ya este pueblo hay maltratado. Ay, 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 maldito Paco Verdugo.
¡Ay, ay, atrás viene el zorrillo! ¡Ay, ay, ay, con el guanaco! La estación Maquedano. ¡Ay, ay, ay, llena de pago! Atrás viene el zorrillo. ¡Ay, ay, ay, con el guanaco!
Llena de pago, sí. Ay, 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 come tapado. Yo marcho por tus hijos. Ay, 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 por mis hermanos. Ay, que creí poderoso. Maldito pago asqueroso. ¡Olé!
Just a little content note before we get started. This is going to involve some discussion of fairly nasty police violence and a bit of discussion of drugs as well. So if those are topics you require any kind of psychological preparation for, this would be a good time to just take a minute. Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. Today we're going to start out in the first of what is going to be a series that will develop as I have time to come up with more material that I'm calling A Dictionary of Struggle. Now, this is about a series that I will be calling Chile, A Dictionary of Struggle. Now, the point of this series is to introduce you as people who are not Spanish speakers, and also Spanish speakers who aren't really familiar with Chilean Spanish, which, as you probably already know, is practically a language unto itself, with some terms that are essential to understanding what's going on there. These are terms that will often, if you're relying on Google Translate, which really nobody should, it's for entertainment purposes only, to make sense out of articles that you read, these will almost certainly be translated wrong. So this will be a way to go word by word in no particular order, simply as they occur to me or as they seem relevant, to introduce some of the key terms and concepts of the struggle that is going on in Chile. Now, before I get started, there are a few people I'd like to thank, because without the work that they do, these videos wouldn't be half as good. These are video collectives in Chile, mostly based in Santiago, who are every day out on the streets taking considerable risks to their own safety and to their equipment to get extremely high-quality footage of the struggle and the extreme violence that the state is visiting on anyone who is challenging in it. Now, the first of these, in no particular order, is Piensa Prensa. Also, Chile Oculto. That's Oculto with a K. Resumen.cl. This is an online news site based in Concepcion, further to the south. They do print journalism that is always of very high quality, and they also do videos, live coverage of protests and repression. I am a fairly semi-regular translator of their articles as well when there's something that comes up that is of international interest and that international attention needs to be drawn to. Also, prensaupal.cl. Now, I'm just going to list all of them that I can think of at the moment. They all have YouTube channels, which I highly recommend that you subscribe to if you want to keep up to date on what's going on in the streets of Chile, and Twitter accounts as well, and I'll be putting up those links for you so that you can add them. If you're interested in Chile, these are people that you definitely need to follow, and without their extremely high quality footage taken under very trying conditions, this would be much harder to do. Without further ado, let's get started with our first installment of Chile, a Dictionary of Struggle. Now, in this first installment of Chile, a Dictionary of Struggle, we're going to deal with some terms that are ubiquitous in any discussion of what's going on in Chile right now, and really for quite some time now. The first one is paco, or more formally, carabinero. The pacos, or the carabineros, are the military police in Chile. And now, you hear in other places, people will talk about police militarization, militarized police. The carabineros, the pacos, are not that. The thing about the pacos is that they are actually a military unit. They were founded, which is to say actually broken off from the army, during the dictatorship of Ibáñez del Campo in the 1920s. They had started out as a cavalry unit of the army, and they retained their military structure and nature after that in 1927, and still have it ever since. What that means is they're divided strictly into officers, also known as PNS, Personal de Nombramiento Supremo, which is to say they have a presidential commission, and enlisted personnel, also known as PNI, Personal de Nombramiento Institucional. This is a strict military hierarchy, and it is enforced by the Chilean Code of Military Justice, the Código de Justicia Militar. Up until fairly recently, if you got accused of doing something to a paco, you as a civilian would end up in a military court. That was reformed just a few years ago. Now, at all times in their history, their main function has been repression. That was why Ibáñez del Campo decided to create them in the first place. That is why, and they've been maintained ever since. They have, and their name even is actually after a weapon, a carabina, also known as a carbine. Carabineros means people who carry carbines, and if you look at their emblem, you will see that it is two carbines crossed. Now, it's been a long time since anyone's seen them, and more recently their weapons have mostly included shotguns. And in the 80s, they were quite handy with Uzis, which they used to lethal effect against pretty much anyone who was opposing Pinochet. Now, the current head of the Pacos, General Director Mario Rosas, has been in the news because he got caught on tape telling the Pacos that it didn't matter what they got up to, he was not going to kick anyone out of the service. And indeed, it has been extremely difficult to get any kind of criminal accountability for the military police in Chile, which is in my opinion, the appropriate way to be translating this term, because they're not militarized police. They didn't start out as a normal police force and then become militarized. They started out as an army unit, and mostly still are one. So, the military police have been caught doing all sorts of illegal shit I mean, not just recently, but especially recently. One of the things they're known for lately is shooting directly at people's faces with buckshot that is supposedly made of rubber. It turned out, as somebody actually picked up some of this buckshot and did a proper chemical and physical analysis of it, it turns out, yes, there is some rubber, but it's mostly metal, and 20% of it, rather, is lead. So, this is just basically regular buckshot that is just slightly softer. It is the hardest that you can get on the hardness scale that is used to measure anything that has some kind of a polymer or rubber component, because it is, to a significant degree, made of steel and lead. Now that is another, and now the term for that stuff is perdigones. And you see it all over the place. Supposedly, they were ordered to stop using it because of all of the eye injuries. The last time I checked figures, it was something like 356 people have lost one or both eyes, mostly just one, fortunately, from being shot at with these, with this buckshot, or in some cases with tear gas grenades, also known as lacrimógena. Now, that segues us in to our next set of terms, and these are terms that you're going to have a lot more interesting results if you try to Google Translate them. Now, we already started on this subject just a minute ago, but just going to carry on with some terms describing the pets of the pacos. These are terms that I haven't actually checked what Google Translate will do with them, but I imagine it's not going to do anything particularly good. The first one, the most famous one, is the guanaco. Now, if you look this up, chances are what you're going to find is that it is a dromedary, a relative of the camel, that is indigenous to the Andean and, I believe, Patagonian region. And that's not inaccurate. That's where this thing gets its name. Because, like the guanaco, like the original, the police guanaco, more formally known as carro lanzagua, carries a large amount of water. And you see them at every protest. It doesn't really matter. I mean, literally, preschool teachers protest, and they will bring out the guanaco. They have absolutely no restraint when it comes to these things. And the guanaco is so hated because it shoots out water at 4,000 liters a minute. If you get a direct hit, as has happened a few times, it can kill you. And in fact, in some cases, including in 2015, a student by the name of Rodrigo Avilés, people have nearly been killed by getting a direct hit from the stream at full blast. Now, the other thing about the guanaco is it's not just water. Even in relatively normal times, I mean, my personal experience dates back to about 2015, you could be guaranteed to find a potent mix of chemical irritants that made the air unbreathable even if you were out of the direct stream or not even getting any of it at all on you. And I can tell you from experience that that stuff aerosolizes extremely well, and even hours after the last time a guanaco has fired its cannons, you will find that the air is distinctively irritating in an area where they've been. It seemed... Now, more recently, and this isn't the first time I should say, there were reports of this back in 2011-2012 during the major kickoff of the student movement that began the cycle of mobilizations that is reaching its culmination today. There have been reports of people getting severe, like, second-degree chemical burns from the water coming out of the Guanaco. More recently, people have been able to do analyses on it, and they found a significant component of caustic soda, sodium hydroxide, in the water. Now, the military police and the Chilean government are notoriously tight-lipped when it comes to the content of their chemical weapons. And in fact, people who have submitted samples to labs have found that within Chile, they've done, they actually did sort of a controlled experiment where they went, they sent some to labs within Chile and some to labs outside. They found that the labs in Chile, with the same sample, found the contents to be considerably more innocuous than labs outside of Chile, which rather strongly suggests that they're being very careful not to piss off the government. In any case, we're seeing a number of examples of injuries that really cannot be referred to CS gas, which is widely believed to be normally in the water from the Guanaco. Including just yesterday, footage was taken of a Guanaco number 44 in Santiago that was shooting out a stream that was yellowish, orangish in color, and people reported that they immediately started vomiting when this started to aerosolize into the air. Nobody is sure yet what was in that, but it definitely wasn't just water. And yesterday, again, was another day for significant chemical burns. So that is the Guanaco. Now, the inseparable companion of the Guanaco is another cute woodland creature, the zorrillo. Also known as the skunk, and like the Guanaco, you can kind of guess right there from the name why and what it is. It's another armored vehicle. They like armored vehicles in the pacos. And its little speciality is that it blasts high-pressure tear gas at specific targets. You'll see them often just driving right by and harassing protesters and just sort of random people who happen to be nearby, where you'll see a huge puff of smoke and then nobody could fucking breathe. That is the zorrillo. Now, they've been now you can see them pretty much anywhere in the past couple of months in Chile. And anytime you see a squat little thing that looks kind of like a tank but doesn't have a cannon and the exhaust seems to be coming out the side, you're looking at a zorrillo. That, unlike the Guanaco, which you can see in other places, they have them in the north of Ireland. They don't call them that, and they're painted a slightly less military color. And in Germany as well, and I believe in France, though to my knowledge nobody has in those countries reported the kind of serious chemical burns that people are getting from the Guanaco. And then the zorrillo, on the other hand, I don't think, to my knowledge, nobody else is using them. They're certainly not in use in any place that I've actually heard of. Usually just tear gas grenades are enough when tear gas are being used, but in Chile, the zorrillo is an essential component of the state terror that is the response to any demonstration that is not being put on by fascists, who can always count on police protection on the rare occasions when they're able to get together enough people to even constitute a demonstration. Usually they're lucky to get enough people together to have a five-a-side match. From the Guanaco and the zorrillo, the inseparable woodland pals of the pacos in their quest to terrorize any kind of protest that challenges the Pinochet regime, which has outlived Pinochet's time in office by decades, and Pinochet's belated death by a number of years, is La falopa, also officially known as mentholatum, which does indeed mean mentholatum. However, falopa means coke. Now, over the past several weeks, numerous cases have emerged where military police have been seen doing lines of blow, aka falopa. Don't ask me where the term comes from. For me, it always evokes the fallopian tubes. It's never made a whole lot of sense to me. Nobody seems to know exactly where these things come from. But they've been caught doing lines of falopa before going off to attack protesters. Now, what exactly does mentholatum have to do with coke? I hear you ask, and it's a very good question. Well, the answer is Lieutenant Colonel Karina Sosa of the Human Rights Division of the Military Police. Now, after the footage first started to emerge of military police doing lines of coke before they went off to attack protesters, this is back in late October, early November, Colonel Sosa went in front of the Senate's Human Rights Commission in Chile to explain what was going on. And her explanation was that supposedly the military police were snorting lines of mentholatum, also Vicks VapoRub, basically, in order to counteract the effects of tear gas. Now, anyone who's familiar with tear gas and with mentholatum can see why this is obviously fucking bullshit. But in Chile, various biochemists actually had to take time out of their day to write a report explaining why this made absolutely no bloody sense. Because the thing about mentholatum is it opens your nasal passages. It opens your airways. Which means you will suck down more tear gas rather than less. But the thing is, if you snort mentholatum gel, which is what they were claiming to do, what Colonel Sosa actually said in the Senate that they were doing, what it will most likely do is block your nasal passages to the point where absolutely nothing at all is coming in. So, and cause significant airway irritation, and plus the gel will cause mucus to secrete, and there is nothing that absorbs CS gas quite like mucus. But we have it on the authority of the head of the Human Rights Brigade of the Military Police, which, I mean, I think most people were probably quite surprised to hear such a thing existed, because the idea that there was anyone who supposedly had anything to do with human rights in the Chilean military police came as news. That job has to be like the Maytag repairman, not so much because there's nothing to do, because there's no problems, but because simply nobody ever has any questions about human rights in the military police. They don't have the slightest concept of it, and when they are actually interviewed on the subject, it turns out they don't even know what they are, actually. Nobody's ever told them any of this shit. They just tell them how to go off and break heads. But since a complete sadistic disposition and a complete ignorance of human rights law isn't always enough when you have an entire country rebelling against the regime, and when I say that, we're talking about, according to the military police's own figures, over 12% of the population has actively participated in mobilizations. That's on top of that, polls have repeatedly shown that over 80% of the population supports them. Meanwhile, the government has the support of 4.6% of the population, which is equivalent to the amount of alcohol in a bottle of Corona. So not even good lager. So, in order to get that extra competitive edge against an exceedingly pissed off population that just isn't taking it anymore, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of mentolatum. I have a feeling that probably if somebody ever cut off their supply, the come down would be, it would put out the entire military police out of commission for weeks. And probably the regime would fall almost immediately. So, just to wrap up, today we've looked at various terms to do with repression in Chile. We've talked about the pacos, the military police, also known as Carabineros de Chile, and more commonly known as los pacos culiao, which in sentences means the fucking cops, but you will hear it often as a standalone utterance, and then it's basically Chile's equivalent of fuck the police. And their woodland pals, the guanaco and the zorrillo, as well as their trusty sidekick, mentolatum. Stay tuned for the next edition of Chile, a Dictionary of Struggle, here on the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel for more terms to help you understand what's going on in Chile. Until then, make sure to like and subscribe to Piensa Prensa, Chile Oculto, and Prensa Opal Chile, as well as Resumen.cl. And if you like this and you want to support my work, please like and subscribe, and I also would be happy to see you as a patron on my Patreon. The link is going to show up on the screen right about now. Have a good rest of your day. All your cops be coming down off coke rather than just going up on it.